Covering the community, events, and people of Georgia, Carolina. This is the Means Report. Here is Brad Means.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Means Report. So happy to have you with us. And again, we're grateful for you taking part of your weekend to be here with us. We have a very informative broadcast ahead for the next 30 minutes or so. We're going to begin by talking about sexual assault. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and we're going to help you, especially when it comes to young people, know where to draw the line, know what sexual assault is, and know how to make people aware of it so that they can prevent it. We have a couple of experts on the set of the Means Report to break that down for us. As always, we're big on the fight against cancer and awareness of that fight and the people who are waging it every day. And along those lines, we have a representative of, well, a family that's dealing with cancer and the Relay for Life that's coming up in just a few short days in Columbia County, how we can all take part and stand shoulder to shoulder that evening to show our support. That plus our question of the week and responses from last week's query. All ahead on the Means Report. First, though, we're going to talk about sexual assault and sexual assault awareness. And to do that, we have back on the set Ruthie Garcia from SafeHomes. Ruthie, now a veteran, really, of the Means Report. I think this is your third or fourth time here.
Right.
And thank you for that. Jenny Lindsay, also an expert on this subject. She's affiliated with Rape Crisis. She's a counselor with them, also a marriage counselor by trade and a family therapist. Thank you for being with us, Jenny.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. Did I get your title right? Okay, good. Glad y'all are both here, and really for an extremely important subject. You know, this past week on News Channel 6, we profiled a young lady named Erin Marin, who was in South Carolina to help introduce legislation to the General Assembly that will stiffen the punishments for child abuse, for child sexual abuse in particular. And so my first question is, and I guess I'll just ask you, Jenny, when is a good age to start talking about sexual abuse to our children, to start talking to them about what's right and what's wrong? Because in the soundbite that we had from this young lady in South Carolina, she basically said it's never too early, and a lot of times it's because somebody doing the abuse is somebody you know. Your thoughts?
Well, both of those points are very important because, first of all, the vast majority of all sexual assault, whether it's child or adult, is someone that you know, a family member, a friend, an acquaintance. And the other part of that's also true. It's never too early, and you don't have to tell scary stories about bad people.
Right.
But talking with your child in a developmentally appropriate way about sexuality, about healthy sexuality. With little kids, that means using the correct name for body parts, so that if something does happen, they can tell you. They have language to let you know what happened. And then it also becomes not a scary subject for them. You know, this is something that mom and dad talk with me about, and it's not something that's secret or something that's scary. And so the more we can talk with our kids about sexuality and healthy sexual development, the better prepared they're going to be kind of to defend themselves and to communicate with us if something does happen.
Ruthie, you've stumbled upon some research recently that is sort of scary when it comes to people who either witness or are victims of who witness or in an environment of abuse when they're young, and how it impacts them as they get older. Talk about that.
Well, there has been some extensive research done, some longitudinal research, where victims of sexual abuse or domestic violence or both, or either witnesses of such as children, are 65 to 70% more likely to be victims of such as an adult.
Wow, so it really is a lifelong impact.
Exactly.
How do you feel, Jenny, right now about the level of awareness? If you had to just really go general for me, would you say that most people are on the ball when it comes to educating their kids and having their radar cranked up when it comes to this?
That's a great question, and I think that we have a tiny piece of it. I think with our kind of stranger danger and scary person jumping out of an alley, we're fine.
Right.
However, that is not the majority of people who are offenders. I think we need to do a much better job, both with adults, young adults, and children, with people that they might know. And by that I mean educating other adults, kind of as a society in general, educating people, educating bystanders, about what's healthy sexuality and what isn't, healthy dating relationships. You know, we're starting to do better with teenagers in schools about healthy dating and safe dating. because unfortunately domestic violence can start at a very young age, teenagers, that kind of thing.
Let me talk about teenagers and even older than that when it comes to sexual domestic violence, sexual abuse. How do you define that? How do you, even within the confines of a relationship, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, when does it cross the line and become sexual abuse? How do you define that?
Well, sexual abuse is one of the 5 types that are recognized as part of domestic violence or family violence, interpersonal violence, as it's often referred to. Sexual abuse can range from coercion to have sex within a relationship, all the way to forced sexual acts of many different types. We won't necessarily have to, itemize those, but and the gambit in between. You and I have spoken before about that there's a new trend where it's another form of control to not allow the spouse to use birth control, not allow the spouse to, in so doing, trying to get them pregnant so that they'll further have control over the victim. And what's scary is that the teenagers don't really understand that being pushy for sex is not okay.
Right.
That they think that just means that they really want it, so to speak. And with the CDC findings that children, teenagers specifically, 1 in 3 will be involved with some sort of dating violence in their lifetime. 1 in 3. That's scary to me.
Yeah.
And of course that includes sexual violence because, as I mentioned, it's one of the types of abuse.
Either one of y'all, are we doing enough in our schools as far as sex ed classes? Is this even part of sexual education in schools?
No, I think we need to do a lot more. I think there's a fear that if we talk about sexuality, then people are going to go out and have sex, which is not true. I think quite the opposite. If we can do more to both talk about physical health, safety, STDs, pregnancy prevention, but also more explicitly talk about relationships, healthy sexuality, what is consent, what is sexual assault, what is date rape, what is acquaintance rape, all of that stuff. The more education that young people have, the better prepared they're going to be to make good decisions.
Let me go back to the children for a moment, please, because we do have a lot of parents and grandparents especially who watch this broadcast. And if you're trying to have that talk with your children, you mentioned age-appropriate conversations, using the right terms when it comes to their body parts. But if you want to make sure they weren't abused when they come home from a relative's house or when they come home from a friend's house, do you just ask them point blank, did someone touch you last night, or do you go to the relative? It can be very uncomfortable.
It can be difficult, and I think that's where we kind of have to back up and kind of set that stage that that it's okay for your children to tell you things, that you are kind of limiting the number of adults that they're around, that you have an idea about who they're around, who else is in that home, what adults have access to your child. And that you are routinely asking them non-threatening questions so that if you are concerned, it's not all of a sudden, you're hounding your kid or they're afraid, I'm going to get in trouble, mom's going to get upset if she finds this out. So the best thing you can do is to be open and to be kind of calm about it and kind of do some practice work, talk to them about what happened at grandma's, how did it go, anything that happened that made you uncomfortable. And then you can always tell kids, anytime anything happens that you don't like or you feel weird about, you can always tell me and you won't be in trouble.
I tell you what, that's extremely helpful. It really is, because it can be a difficult conversation to have.
It's hard to talk about.
What about alcohol and drugs? Can they help, I don't want to say lessen, but let's say that what would typically be an assault, what would typically be a case of rape, perhaps, can be looked at differently if drugs or alcohol are involved? In other words, if the man and the woman are both under the influence, does that change things if an attack happens?
Well, I think it does in court.
Yeah.
I think that we've seen in recent months and weeks, and really for many years now, that that's often used by the defense as a defense.
It is, yeah.
And that's disturbing, because we do know that drugs and alcohol are much more commonly involved with sexual assault and domestic violence. So therefore, why would we try to separate that then and say that it doesn't have anything to do with it?
Well,
That
and I
doesn't
think
make sense to me.
especially here with young people graduating and going off to college and entering adulthood, really, is the excuse, well, we were both drunk, therefore I didn't do anything wrong. How's that hold up?
Well, I think that you've touched on something that for me personally that I really want to move towards in our advocacy and education, and that's that we tend to look at the victim. We put the onus of the problem on the victim rather than our research dollars. Our focus is not on the abuser, not on the perpetrator. And so until we start doing those types of things and really looking at why, for instance, when you mentioned sex education in schools, we need to focus more on not just what it looks like, but this is what you don't do. When we're talking to our children, we need to not just say you don't hit girls, but how about you don't push people into affection, you don't push people into, and no means no. Start that, I could definitely see where we could start that at age 1, because we're already saying, I said no. Well, why not just extrapolate that to mean if someone tells you no for sexual advances or whatever, then that's what they mean.
Really though, I mean, what's a good age? I mean, it can't be 1. It can't be when they're little children. I just had the talk with my son last week about the birds and the bees. He's 11. I probably waited too long. I'm sure I did. But we had that talk, but nowhere during that conversation did I feel compelled to say, by the way, don't ever force a woman to have sex against her will. All I was trying to explain was where babies come from.
Right.
Yeah, and you don't have to start the conversation with sexual intercourse. It could be, I have a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old. If he's hanging on her and hugging her and she says no, then you stop.
Yeah.
You can start it with whatever's age appropriate, whether it's touching or pushing or any kind of behavior like that. You respect people's space, you respect people's boundaries, and you don't do things that people don't like.
Yeah.
And so you can, in that way. But I think junior high, 12, 13, 14, you can start kind of age appropriately with boundaries and with respect and with that kind of thing. And then, you don't have to start with the big stuff.
Right, but especially as they start dating.
Absolutely.
I tell you how the conversation ended. He asked me what a condom was, and I explained it to him, and then I said it's something that's used perhaps if you don't want to make a baby, which is what the whole conversation was about, making babies. And he said, well, why would you be with mommy if it wasn't to make a baby? Why would you do that? And that's how it ended. I'm like, I know no more.
Right,
I now do not know what to say.
Right.
So it's tough to find the right words. What about, Jenny, for the victims themselves? I know that this broadcast is recorded on a Thursday, and we're here just hours away from the Take Back the Night event at Georgia Regents University's Summerville campus. And it's always a special event and a much needed event. And what about the services that are there for the victims? I want those folks watching to know that there's a place to go.
Absolutely. Well, Rape Crisis, we have a wide range of services. We provide advocates in person at the emergency room anytime there's a rape or sexual assault case, whether it was yesterday or whether it was longer. I provide, and we have another therapist who provides therapy as free of charge for any family member, any survivor. We have people who work with our volunteers. We have people who can do legal advocacy. If someone is in court for any kind of charge, we can just go and kind of be with them, kind of walk them through the process. If they need to file charges and don't know how to do that, just kind of walking them through that process. And then just connecting them with resources. What do you need to go forward? How can we help you to heal?
What have you noticed during your time observing these victims when they're surrounded by others, when there is that support system? Does that help?
It's unbelievable. I mean, it's just night and day when there are, particularly with children. If you know a child, if you have a child who has been sexually assaulted, if they're adult, if their support people believe them, support them, protect them, take good care of them, they are fine. Children are very resilient. Children who have serious lifelong problems are those where let's keep it a secret, let's not share this isn't for anyone to know.
Right.
That kind of thing. So yes, you cannot overstate the importance of that support and that in people's healing.
Where does Rape Crisis leave off and SafeHomes pick up, or vice versa, or are you both out there doing the same thing when it comes to sexual assault victims?
Well, it's interesting that you say that because there is a certain amount of vice versa. Rape Crisis has realized through some interviews that the person that they're speaking with is a victim of domestic violence also, and we've been able to pick up kind of where that leaves off, as well as in the reverse. Quite very commonly, we find that a victim of domestic violence has been a victim of sex abuse and can absolutely be improved. Their lives can be improved by going to Rape Crisis and seeing folks like Jenny.
We've been working together with a grant recently where we have another therapist, Donna Lewis, who specifically provides services for SafeHomes clients.
Yes.
And I do a support group at SafeHomes, so we kind of do a lot of shared responsibility with therapy and education, that kind of thing, and that's worked out quite well.
Is it okay to, especially, and I know you're going to say yes, but I just want to make sure before we send all the parents marching out into their homes to have conversations, but when you see things in the headlines like the Steubenville, Ohio case, and for those of you who aren't aware, that was the case where 2 teenage boys, 16 and 17, were convicted of raping a 16-year-old girl. She was unconscious at the time, if memory serves. They tweeted about it, they bragged about it via text, and they got sent to jail. And so can we take stories like that for our teenagers, perhaps, show them to them and say, this is what happens. This is what mommy and daddy mean when they say show respect.
Well, I think possibly a bit more helpful way to do that would be, yes, they're going to know about it, they're going to hear about it, and actually the kind of Sexual Assault Awareness Month campaign this year is it's time to talk about it. Talk about it. You can't talk too much about it, but talking to them about it. What do you think of this? What do you think happened? What could have been done differently? Where could we have gone back and changed things in this situation?
What about someone who's a potential witness to a sexual assault? Somebody who's at a party. How do you know that that's what you're witnessing? Again, it's that line. How do you know?
Well, I can tell you both anecdotally and kind of from research, anytime you see, if you're a guy, you see your buddy going upstairs with someone who's clearly not conscious or sober, talk to them. What's the worst that can happen? They're going to get mad at you?
Yeah.
Is that worse than someone getting raped? No. I mean, you can't really go wrong by intervening. Or if you have a girlfriend you're with at a party, hey, are you sure you want to do this? Are you okay? Is this what you want? That kind of thing. Don't be afraid to speak up. No one, I don't think has ever been hurt by someone trying to speak up and make sure that things are okay.
Yeah, I agree. It's just about having those conversations, isn't it? Being
Right.
brave enough to.
Right, absolutely. And the more you're talking about that at home and the more we're talking about it at school, the less awkward it's going to be to talk about that at a party.
Well, I tell you what, both of you have given some frank answers to a situation that needs attention. And I really do appreciate what y'all are doing, and for victims and for all of us to be more aware. So thanks.
Well, thank you for letting us do this. It's not something that a lot of people want to talk about, so I'm really excited for us to have a chance to do that.
No, it's not. And I know when we talked about the topic, we thought, okay, what about this broadcast Sunday, 12 noon, people just getting back from church, turning on the TV, and this is the topic. But you know what? No, it needs to be discussed. And we are seeing these horrible headlines because kids are committing crimes because they weren't made aware of how responsible and how they need to be and how they need to behave. So again, we appreciate it, and the door's always open here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All right, Ruthie Garcia, Jenny Lindsay, SafeHomes and Rape Crisis, we appreciate their work so much. When we come back, we're going to talk about cancer awareness, how you can show your support for the people who are fighting that fight each and every day. Relay for Life is almost upon us.